What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the show. I am Tony, your host, with another reaction trailer for y'all. This one's going to be Clayface. So, I don't know what you guys know about DC Comics, but I happen to be a big comic book nerd, and I love Clayface, dude. Here's the problem. I am like many other people, not the biggest fan of the DC universe. Has nothing to do with Snyder and whoever. Like, dude, I've heard so many of the arguments. I like Zack Snyder as a filmmaker. He is not why I don't like the DCU. For me, it is it's superhero fatigue for sure. I was a big time fucking comic book fan, dude, in high school, back in the days of like 2007, 2008. I was everywhere, and in my opinion, that was the time to be a comic book fan. And sure, there's no better time than now. You know, it's obviously growing, it's thriving, but because we get so many of these movies, it is so hard to care anymore. It is really hard to care because we get so many different Supermans and Batmans and Spider-Mans and all this shit. And I'm going to be honest about something else. I'm not the biggest James Gunn fan. It's not that I don't think he's amazing. It's just that he hasn't done anything. It's proven to me that like he's the guy that needs to run this. And like I know a lot of people love the new Superman. I watched it for a buddy because I told him I wanted to at least try it, and I did, and I actually enjoyed it. It was funny, but it's not what I want. It's not what I want, dude. And then like I will say I like James Gunn's take on Suicide Squad, like the reboot sequel they did. I liked it. A lot of people didn't, but there's just so much fatigue, man. And DC is one of those. They're trying to do so much. So, like, you know, it's hard to care, if that makes sense. I'm like, yeah, I can get why people are so invested in it, but with all the shit Marvel's doing, it's hard to care. There's enough right there. That's like oversaturation. And then you got DC doing its shit. So it's not that I hate superhero movies. I just have fatigue for it, man. I don't like that there's so many of these universes and all this shit's together. Like, I get why people like it. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but that being said, Clayface. So I read the comics growing up because I was a comic book nerd. I've always loved the iteration. Like I've always loved Clayface's background, and he's a character that I would argue has never ever really had a true faithful adaptation. And Clayface is kind of a scary character in nature. Again, because this is James Gunn at the helm, it's really hard to feel excited. So I chose not to like look up anything on this. The only thing I know is James Gunn did say that this was going to be a straight horror film. And I'm like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. There we go. So I've talked enough. Let's just dive into this trailer. I don't know anything about this movie, dude. I just know that it is DC Comics, and from the looks of it, it might actually be a horror film. So I am pumped. Let's just get right into it. All right, and here we go. Jesus Christ. This is a creepy ass face, dude. Ooh. Oh shit, this might actually be a fucking straight up horror film. Who did they get to play Clayface, man? I really should have done some research. Oh, dude. This looks pretty fucking cool, actually. Oh. God damn, dude. Damn, it is from DC Studios. Okay. So it's looking like October 23rd. Not too far along, actually. That's only a couple months away. I'm excited for that. Probably not going to see it in theaters. You guys know me by now. I mean, if you follow me, you know how I am with that shit. Definitely not going to see it in theaters, but it looks good. I like that it is, from what I'm seeing, a straight up horror film, and that's how that character needs to be handled, in my opinion. Like, there's so many. Joker's a good example. When they did the film with Joaquin Phoenix, I was very much against it until I saw it, and I was like, you know what? This was good. Like, if we can do more movies like this, sweet. Then they made a second one where they purposely destroyed it, and I was like, yeah, I knew this was coming. Or the Batman, dude, that was great. And then they did the Penguin show. I fucking loved that. I was like, dude, I like how we're adding darker horror elements and more realistic, because that's what made those movies stand out, in my opinion. Like, the Dark Knight movies were so big because even though you could argue they're comic-y, they're dark, they're realistic, and that's what has always saved DC, in my opinion. People love to complain about it and say that it's what holds it back. I disagree. I think that the darker tones, the more brutal look on life, like the more just the darker view in general, the atmosphere is much better for DC, in my opinion. I've always said that Marvel has the cooler characters, DC has the better characters. However, how do you handle that? Well, when you've got the better characters in terms of story, there's so much you can do with that. It's the same thing with the Marvel having the cooler characters. There's so much that can be done with that, but you have to remember that there's things that stick out about each brand, right? A lot of people would argue DC is colorful, and that's the truth. They are. They're a comic book company just like Marvel, but the way their stories are told are much darker than Marvel, in my opinion. I mean, we could debate that all day long, because then again, X-Men is very much about like being different, and like those are dark in nature too. But a lot of comic books are like that. However, DC has always had the darker, more realistic characters. And again, don't hold me to the fucking point of like, oh, realistic, huh? Two-Face, like that's real. Mr. Freeze, that's real. Like we know that's not real. But DC is better, in my opinion, at handling more realistic tones. At least for what they're trying to do. I mean, again, Justice League sucked, but I've seen better. You know, I mean, Marvel's not that amazing either. I'm not one of those, it's this side versus that side. I used to be. I really used to be like, I'm a DC guy and Marvel movies suck. And it's really not that. It just really depends on what kind of film it is, just like what kind of comic it is. Because when it comes to comics, I've always liked the darker, more terrifying stories. History of Violence is a good example. Or this one right here, dude. Wanted, Watchmen, these are all like darker, grittier, more adult-like themes. The tones are just darker. And even in the films, the way they're presented, they're more, they're rated R. And that's what I like. That's always been DC's strength, is that they can do those things. They don't have to be PG-13. I think that where DC fucked up is they wanted to be like Marvel so much. They saw it as, damn, Marvel is really cashing in on this universe. We got to do it too if we want to stay above ground. And the way I see it is, again, I'm not an executive. I don't know how money works in Hollywood. Well, I will say this. I think if they would have kept doing films like they did with The Dark Knight, they would have been just fine competing with Marvel. DC doesn't need the universe. It really doesn't, just based on the past films I've seen. But again, I'm one person. Those are just my opinions. So is what it is. Clayface, are you going to see it in theaters? I'm definitely not. I've already said that like 3-4 times, but I'm definitely going to review it now that I know it is straight up a horror film. James Gunn, please don't let me down, dude. Comment below. Let me know what you think. Oh, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to see more of this mug. But in the meantime, folks, remember to always stay rad.